What I saw next punched me in the gut. A flood of text messages between her and a guy named Jason lit up the screen. Their conversation casual at first, but it quickly took a darker turn. My stomach twisted as I scrolled through their messages, reading every word that shattered the reality I thought we had. Jason, last night was incredible. Can't wait for more. Emma, you and me both winking face. Same time next week. I felt my breath catch in my throat, my hands shaking as I dropped the phone back onto the counter. The entire room seemed to spin, and I grabbed the edge of the sink just to steady myself. What the hell was this? Last night? Next week? The nausea hit hard, but I wasn't going to let myself throw up. Not yet. It was clear. She was cheating. My wife, the woman I'd loved and built my life around, was off with some guy while I sat here like an idiot, waiting for her to come home. How did I not see it sooner? The late nights, the distance, the excuses about needing space. All the while, she was sneaking around behind my back. And she didn't even try to hide it, leaving her phone unlocked like I wouldn't dare look. I guess she thought I trusted her too much to ever question it. I didn't know what to do. Should I confront her right when she walks through the door? Or pretend like I hadn't just seen the thing that shattered everything I believed about us? The minutes crawled by as I stood there, numb and gripping the kitchen counter like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the texts I'd just seen. Felt like a bad dream. No, worse, like some twisted prank the universe decided to play on me. But I knew it was real. Too real. Then, I heard the sound of the front door creaking open. Emma's footsteps echoed softly through the hallway. She was home. My heart pounded in my chest, and for a brief second, I considered hiding what I knew. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation. Maybe she'd tell me it was all a misunderstanding, a joke. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I watched as she walked into the kitchen, her face lighting up with a smile that, for the first time in years, felt entirely fake. "Hey babe," she said, casually hanging her coat on the chair. "Sorry I'm late. The girls and I lost track of time." That was it, the lie. So effortless, so smooth, like she had practiced it 1,000 times. And maybe she had. I couldn't keep it in anymore. My jaw clenched, and I could feel the anger boiling over, but I didn't explode. Not yet. "Where were you really, Emma?" I asked, my voice quieter than I expected it to be. She stopped mid-step, her eyes darting to meet mine, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of panic. But just as quickly, she recovered. "I told you I was with the girls." "Why?" I walked over to the counter and grabbed her phone, holding it up between us. "You sure about that?" Her eyes narrowed, and I could see the walls going up. "What are you talking about?" she asked, playing innocent, but I wasn't falling for it. Not this time. I tapped the screen, bringing up the messages again, shoving the phone in her face. "Jason, last night was incredible. Same time next week. You want to explain that?" She froze, and I could see the gears turning in her head, trying to figure out how to talk her way out of this. But there was no escaping it now. The truth was out there, and I wasn't going to let her wriggle her way around it. Her lips parted, and she let out a small, fake laugh, shaking her head. "Oh my God. Seriously? Are you going through my phone now? What the hell, Greg? Don't you trust me?" She turned it around, making it about me. Classic Emma. Always the victim when things didn't go her way. But I wasn't about to let her twist this. "Trust you? Are you serious right now? You're lying to my face." I snapped, my voice rising. "Who the hell is Jason?" Her expression hardened, and the sweet, innocent act dropped. She crossed her arms over her chest, staring me down like I was the one in the wrong. "Jason is just a friend. Okay? We hung out a couple of times. It's harmless. You're overreacting." "Harmless," I repeated, my voice shaking with rage. "This doesn't sound harmless, Emma. You've been sneaking around behind my back, lying to me for who knows how long. Do you even care about us anymore?" She rolled her eyes and sighed like I was wasting her time. "Greg, you're making a huge deal out of nothing. We didn't do anything. Just hung out. You're acting like a jealous psycho right now." "A jealous psycho. That's what she thought of me. All these years together, and this is how she treated me? Like I was some idiot who didn't know the difference between right and wrong, between truth and lies. But I wasn't done. Then why didn't you tell me about him? Why lie? And what about last night? Huh? While I was here waiting for you, you were off with him, weren't you? She threw her hands up in frustration. Oh my God, Greg. You're being ridiculous. It was just a night out. It didn't mean anything. God. Do you always have to be so damn insecure? Insecure. That word hit harder than I expected. Like it was my fault she was doing this. Like I wasn't enough for her. So she had to go find someone else. The pain started to creep in beneath the anger, and I felt my chest tighten. How had we ended up here? When did everything go so wrong? I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, but it wasn't working. So, that's it then? You're not even sorry, she scoffed, shaking her head. What do you want me to say, Greg? I told you it was nothing. We didn't do anything. It's not a big deal. You're just blowing this out of proportion. And just like that, I realized she wasn't going to admit anything. She wasn't going to apologize or take any responsibility. To her, this was all my fault, my problem. And that realization hurt more than anything she'd said so far. She didn't care. And I didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal or the fact that she didn't even seem to regret it. Her indifference cut deeper than the betrayal itself. I stood there, staring at the woman I had spent years of my life with, someone I thought I knew better than anyone. And now, she was acting like I was the crazy one, like I had no right to be upset. The room felt smaller, tighter, like it was closing in on me. My heart raced, and I could feel a mixture of anger, sadness, and disbelief brewing inside me. Blowing it out of proportion? I repeated her words slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. You're cheating on me, Emma. That's not nothing. Do you even hear yourself? She sighed, looking at me with annoyance, like I was just another problem in her day she didn't have time for. Oh my God, Greg. For the last time, nothing happened. You're just being paranoid. We're friends. That's all. Why can't you trust me? Trust. That word was a joke now. I had trusted her, more than anyone else in the world, and she threw it back in my face with lies and excuses. Friends don't send texts like that. I shot back, shaking my head. Friends don't meet up secretly and lie about where they are. She rolled her eyes again, brushing me off like I was a kid throwing a tantrum. You're being so dramatic. I told you it was just a night out. And so what if I didn't mention Jason before? I didn't think it was a big deal. It's not like I'm obligated to tell you about every little thing in my life. Every little thing? I repeated, stunned by her coldness. We're married, Emma. This isn't some random detail. You're hiding a whole part of your life from me. She just shrugged, the ice in her voice making my blood boil. Well, maybe if you weren't so controlling, I wouldn't have to hide things. There it was. She had flipped the whole situation on me, making it my fault. My fault that she was sneaking around. My fault that she was lying. My fault that our marriage was crumbling. The sheer audacity of it left me speechless for a moment. I stood there, my fists clenched at my sides, trying to breathe, trying to keep my head above the tidal wave of emotions crashing down on me. What happened to us? I finally managed to ask, my voice quieter now, not out of fear but from pure exhaustion. When did we get so broken? She didn't even flinch. Nothing happened, Greg. You just became impossible to talk to. Always judging, always questioning me like I'm some criminal. It's exhausting. I stared at her, the woman I thought I would spend the rest of my life with, and I felt like I didn't recognize her anymore. This wasn't the Emma I fell in love with. This was someone else, someone who had built up walls so high, there was no getting through. Someone who no longer cared about the life we had built together. She walked past me, grabbing her phone from my hand like this whole conversation was over. I'm going to bed, she said, her tone dismissive, like she had better things to do than deal with me. Couldn't believe it. She was really walking away. Just like that, as if nothing happened. As if the marriage we had was just a minor inconvenience in her day. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt the room spinning again. Was this it? Was this how it ended? Years of love, loyalty, and sacrifice. All for what? For her to brush me off like I was nothing? You don't even care, do you? I asked, my voice barely a whisper now. She stopped at the doorway, glancing back at me with a coldness that I never thought I'd see from her. Greg, I'm tired. I don't have time for your drama tonight. Drama. That's what she thought this was. Drama. The room fell silent after she left, and I stood there, frozen in place. The reality of what just happened hit me like a freight train. She was gone, not physically but emotionally, mentally gone. This woman, this stranger standing in place of my wife, didn't love me anymore. Hell, I wasn't even sure if she ever had. I walked over to the couch, sitting down heavily, my hands running through my hair as I tried to make sense of everything. The pain was unbearable, like a knife slowly twisting in my chest. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to break down and cry all at once. But instead, I just sat there, staring blankly at the wall, feeling the weight of my entire world crashing down around me. The person I loved most had betrayed me, and worse, she didn't even care. I could still hear her footsteps as she climbed the stairs, her complete lack of remorse echoing in every step. How did it get this far? How did I let this happen? And then, like a switch flipping, the anger came back, stronger this time. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me. I wasn't going to let her make me feel like this was my fault. If she thought she could just sweep this under the rug and carry on like nothing had changed, she had another thing coming. I needed to figure out what to do next, how to confront this mess head-on and stop letting her manipulate me like I was some fool. I sat on the couch, my thoughts a tangled mess. The pain of betrayal kept hitting me in waves, but underneath that pain was something stronger. Rage. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't just some small mistake, some harmless night out, as she tried to claim. Emma had betrayed me, disrespected me, and now she was trying to make me feel like I was the problem. I wasn't going to just sit here and take it. She couldn't treat me like this, like I was disposable, like my feelings didn't matter. I wasn't the type to just roll over and accept being played. No, I had to get my answers, even if they hurt more than the lie she was already living. I stood up, my legs feeling shaky, but my mind was made up. I walked upstairs, my footsteps heavier than usual. When I got to the bedroom, there she was, already in bed, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. She looked up at me for a second, then back down, completely uninterested in the man whose heart she had just shattered. Emma, I said, my voice low but firm. We're not done talking. She sighed dramatically, like this was the last thing she wanted to do. Greg, I told you I'm tired. Can't we just talk tomorrow? No, I said, my voice rising despite my best efforts to keep it controlled. We're talking now. You think you can just go to bed and pretend like none of this happened? Like you didn't just tear our marriage apart? She rolled her eyes again, the same condescending gesture that made my blood boil every time. Greg, you're being ridiculous. I already told you nothing happened. I couldn't take it anymore. Do you hear yourself? I snapped, pacing around the room. You're lying to my face, Emma. I saw the texts. You've been meeting up with him behind my back, sneaking around, lying. And now you want to act like I'm the crazy one. She sat up in bed, glaring at me now, her defenses fully up. You're blowing this way out of proportion. It's not like I slept with him. We just hung out. Jesus, you're acting like I committed a crime. That was it. The final insult. She thought she could get away with it because, to her, it wasn't technically cheating. She thought if she hadn't crossed some imaginary line, she was still in the clear. But this wasn't about some physical boundary. This was about trust, something she had completely destroyed. You're really trying to play that card? I asked, incredulous. You didn't sleep with him, so it's okay? That's what you're going with. She crossed her arms, her expression icy. You're acting like I went off and had a full-blown affair, Greg. It wasn't like that. We talked. We hung out. That's all. Maybe you wouldn't be so mad if you weren't so damn paranoid all the time. Paranoid. That word stung, not because she was right, but because she had used it to deflect, to make me feel small. I wasn't paranoid. I was hurt, betrayed, and furious. "You're unbelievable," I said, shaking my head. "You think I'm paranoid? What about you sneaking out, lying about where you were? How do you explain that, huh? If it was so innocent, why did you hide it?" She hesitated for the first time, her mouth opening and closing like she was searching for an excuse. But when she found her answer, it wasn't what I expected. "Because I knew you'd freak out like this," she finally spat, her voice rising. "You never let me have any space, Greg. You're always hovering, always wanting to know where I am, who I'm with. It's suffocating. I didn't tell you because I wanted one night where I didn't have to deal with your constant questions." I stared at her, my chest tightening again. So, this was what she thought of me. Not a husband who loved her and worried about her, but some controlling, overbearing presence in her life. It was as if every accusation was designed to break me down, to make me feel like the reason she cheated was my fault. "That's a load of crap, and you know it?" I said, my voice trembling with the anger I could barely keep contained. "You didn't hide it because of me. You hid it because you knew it was wrong. You knew what you were doing, Emma. Don't stand there and try to blame this on me." She threw the covers off and stood up, glaring at me from across the room. "I don't have to justify anything to you. If I want to spend time with my friends, I will. If I want space, I'll take it. You don't own me, Greg." The words hit like a punch to the gut. The conversation had spiraled completely out of control, and suddenly it wasn't about Jason anymore. It was about her resentment, her disdain for the life we had built together. All those years, I thought we were on the same team, but now it was like I had been living with a stranger who had just been waiting for the chance to break free. I took a step back, the realization dawning on me in a way that felt more crushing than anything else she had said. She didn't just cheat on me with Jason. She had checked out of our marriage long ago. The love, the connection, it was all gone, and I had been too blind to see it. "So, that's it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You don't care anymore, do you? You don't care about us?" She shrugged, and the coldness in her eyes was enough to freeze any hope I had left. "Maybe I don't. Maybe I'm tired of pretending everything's fine when it's not. I didn't sign up for this kind of life, Greg." Her words hung in the air, and suddenly, it was clear. She wasn't fighting for us. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done. In her mind, I was already out the door. I felt something inside me snap, but instead of yelling, instead of fighting, I turned around and walked out of the room. I couldn't stand there anymore. Not with her. Not with the reality of what our marriage had become. This was the breaking point, and it wasn't just about Jason. It was about everything. I walked downstairs, feeling as if my legs could barely carry me. Every step felt heavier than the last. I wasn't sure what was happening inside me. If it was anger, sorrow, or just sheer numbness. But I needed to get away from her. The bedroom, the marriage, the lies. It all felt too suffocating. I collapsed onto the couch, staring into the darkness of the living room, trying to make sense of the wreckage of my life. I thought about all the years we'd spent together, the promises we'd made, the life we had built. Was it all a lie? How long had she been feeling this way, and why hadn't I seen it sooner? The pain in my chest tightened as I realized I had been fighting for something that was already gone. The woman upstairs wasn't the same person I had married. She was someone else now, someone I couldn't recognize, and it broke me in ways I didn't know were possible. I glanced around the room at the pictures on the wall. Smiling faces from happier times stared back at me, mocking the illusion I had been living in. There was a photo of us from our honeymoon, standing on a beach, carefree and in love. I remembered that day so clearly. The way Emma had laughed, the way she held my hand as if she never wanted to let go. And now, here we were, barely able to stand in the same room together. I felt my fists clench at my sides, the rage bubbling up again, threatening to explode. But I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me lose it. I wasn't going to let her push me over the edge. Not yet. I needed time to think. Time to figure out what the hell I was going to do. Divorce. The word floated through my mind, but I wasn't ready to say it out loud. Not yet. even though it was becoming clearer by the second that there was no saving this marriage, no fixing what she had broken. Suddenly, my phone buzzed on the coffee table, snapping me out of my thoughts. I glanced down and saw a message from my best friend. Ryan. Ryan, hey man, you good? Haven't heard from you in a bit. I stared at the screen for a moment, debating whether I should respond. Part of me wanted to just unload everything on him, to tell him how my entire world had just fallen apart. But another part of me didn't want to admit what was happening. I wasn't ready for the pity, for the "I'm sorry" man responses that would follow. So, I just stared at the phone, letting it buzz in my hand without replying. That's when I heard her footsteps coming down the stairs. Emma was back. Great. I wasn't sure I had the strength for another round of this, but she clearly wasn't done yet. She walked into the living room, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. For a moment, we just stared at each other in silence. It was like two strangers standing in the ruins of something that once mattered, both unsure of what to say or do next. Are you really going to just sit here and sulk all night? She asked, her tone sharp, like she was talking to a child. I didn't respond right away. I was too tired to fight, too tired to argue with her. What do you want from me, Emma? I finally asked, my voice quieter than I intended. You've made it clear how you feel. You've made it clear that this, us, it doesn't matter to you anymore. She rolled her eyes, her frustration evident. Oh, stop with the victim act, Greg. You're not the only one who's been unhappy. Maybe if you weren't so obsessed with your stupid work, we wouldn't be in this mess. There it was again, her ability to twist everything around, to make me feel like I was the reason our marriage was falling apart. But this time, it didn't sting the same way. This time, I saw it for what it was, her way of deflecting, her way of avoiding the truth. You really believe that, don't you? I asked, shaking my head in disbelief. You actually think that this is all my fault? That I'm the reason you've been sneaking around with some guy? Lying to my face. Her eyes flashed with anger. I never said that. I'm just saying things haven't been great between us for a while. And maybe, if you weren't so wrapped up in your job, you would have noticed. I stood up from the couch, unable to sit still any longer. So, that's your excuse? I work too much, so it's okay to cheat? That's what you're saying. I didn't cheat, she snapped, her voice rising. We didn't do anything, Greg. You're the one turning this into something it's not. I laughed bitterly, the sound coming out harsher than I intended. You're unbelievable. You think just because you didn't sleep with him, it's not cheating? You think because it didn't go that far, it's somehow okay? That's not how this works, Emma. You lied to me, you betrayed me, and you don't even have the decency to admit it. She threw her hands up in exasperation, clearly done with the conversation. You know what? I'm done. I'm done trying to explain myself to you. If you want to sit here and play the victim, fine. But I'm not going to keep defending myself. With that, she turned and started walking back upstairs, as if this conversation was just a minor inconvenience in her night. As if the destruction of our marriage was something she could just shrug off and walk away from. I watched her go, my heart heavy, my mind racing. This was it. The end of the road. There was no coming back from this. I had given her every chance to be honest, to show some kind of remorse, but she couldn't even do that. She didn't care. Not about me, not about us, not about the life we had built together. I sat back down on the couch, staring into the empty room, the silence ringing in my ears. The truth was right in front of me, as clear as day. There was no fixing this. No more excuses, no more pretending. I was done too. The weight of everything pressed down on me like 1,000 bricks. But for the first time that night, I felt something close to clarity. Sitting there in the dark, I realized I had been holding onto a fantasy. A version of our marriage that no longer existed. Emma was gone, at least the Emma I had known and loved. What was left was a stranger who didn't care about us, about me, or the destruction she'd caused. And no matter how much I wanted to deny it, the truth was staring me in the face. Our marriage was over. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the wall, my mind cycling through every memory, every moment where things had seemed fine, normal. But those memories were tainted now, covered in a shadow of doubt and betrayal. I kept thinking about how many times she must have looked me in the eye and lied, how many nights I'd sat at home waiting for her while she was out with him. Jason, a name that now felt like a curse. I heard the soft creak of the stairs again. She was coming back down. My body tensed, bracing for round 3, but something in her expression had changed when she reappeared in the doorway. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked bored, like she was over this whole conversation, over the drama, like she was already halfway out the door in her mind. "You know," she started, her voice calm but cold, "maybe this isn't working anymore. Maybe it's time we both admit it." I swallowed hard, her words hanging heavy in the air. She was pushing me toward the one thing I had been trying to avoid all night, making a final decision. The ultimate decision. Divorce. It was the word neither of us had said yet, but it was there, lurking between us. I stood up slowly, feeling the tension between us like an electric charge. "You're right," I said quietly, surprising even myself with how steady my voice was. "This isn't working. But it's not because I've been too busy with work or because I'm paranoid. It's because you've been lying to me, Emma. You broke our trust, and you don't even care enough to fight for this." She tilted her head, crossing her arms again in that same dismissive way that had been driving me insane all night. "And what exactly are you fighting for, Greg? Because from where I'm standing, it seems like you're more upset about your ego being bruised than about me." Her words were a punch to the gut. I opened my mouth to argue, to defend myself, but she kept going, her voice sharp and cutting. "This whole time you've been acting like the victim. But maybe if you paid more attention to me, to us, we wouldn't be here right now. I needed you, Greg. I needed someone who actually cared. And you weren't there." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was rewriting the entire history of our marriage, painting herself as the neglected wife and me as the oblivious husband. But that wasn't true. I had been there for her. Maybe not perfectly, but I had loved her, supported her, and tried to build a life with her. She was twisting everything, warping the truth to fit her own narrative. "So, this is my fault now?" I asked, my voice trembling with frustration. "You cheated because I didn't pay enough attention to you? That's your excuse." She shrugged. "I'm not saying it was right. I'm just saying, maybe this was a wake-up call. For both of us." I stared at her, my mind reeling. A wake-up call? Was she serious? She had destroyed our marriage, lied to my face, and now she was framing it as some kind of life lesson for us both? I felt the anger rise in me again, but this time, it was different. It wasn't the fiery, explosive rage I had felt before. This was cold, controlled. I nodded slowly, the realization hitting me like a wave of calm in the storm. "You're right," I said, my voice steady now. "This is a wake-up call, and I think it's time we both stop pretending." She raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting that response. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath, the finality of my words sinking in as I spoke them. "I mean, this marriage is over, Emma. I'm done. I'm not going to sit here and keep fighting for something that clearly doesn't matter to you." For the first time that night, she looked taken aback. Maybe she hadn't expected me to say it. Maybe she thought she could keep stringing me along, playing her games, keeping me trapped in this nightmare of lies and half-truths. But I was done. "Greg, wait," she started, but I cut her off. "No," I said, shaking my head. "I'm not waiting anymore. I'm not going to keep chasing after someone who doesn't want to be here. You've made your choice, Emma, and now I'm making mine." She stood there, staring at me, her mouth slightly open, but no words came out. For a brief moment, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Regret, maybe? Or was it fear? But it was too late for that. Too much had been said. Too much had been broken. There was no going back. I walked past her, grabbing my keys off the table by the door. "I'm leaving for a few days," I said, not even looking back at her. "When I come back, we'll figure out the details. But this is done." The silence that followed was deafening. I expected her to say something, to argue, to fight me on it. But she didn't. She just stood there, watching me go, as if she had already accepted the end. I walked out the door, the cool night air hitting me like a slap in the face. But it was refreshing. For the first time that night, I felt like I could breathe again. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her destroy me. Not anymore. As I got into my car and started the engine, I realized something. I wasn't the one who had lost. She was. She had lost someone who had truly loved her. Someone who had been willing to fight for her, even when she didn't deserve it. And in the end, she threw it all away. I drove off into the night, the weight of my decision settling in, but there was something else too. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom. I drove aimlessly for a while, the dark road stretching out in front of me as my mind tried to catch up with everything that had just happened. The streetlights passed by in a blur, but inside the car, there was a strange sense of calm. Maybe it was the shock, or maybe it was the relief of finally making a decision. One that had been looming over me all night. Either way, the silence in the car was a welcome change from the chaos that had been my life for the last few hours. My phone buzzed in the passenger seat, but I ignored it. I didn't need any more noise. I needed to think, to process what I had just done. Leaving the house, leaving her, felt surreal, but at the same time, it was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I hadn't realized just how much I had been carrying until I finally let it go. I pulled over at a gas station, more out of habit than anything else, and stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked tired, more tired than I had ever felt in my life. My face was drawn, my eyes bloodshot, and I barely recognized the man staring back at me. This wasn't the Greg I used to be. This was someone broken, someone betrayed. But underneath all of that, I could feel a flicker of something else. Strength. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life, even if that meant walking away from everything I thought I knew. As I sat there, the events of the night replayed in my mind like a bad movie I couldn't turn off. Emma's coldness, her indifference, the way she tried to twist everything and make it my fault. I kept thinking about all the little signs I had ignored over the past few months. The late nights, the excuses, the growing distance between us. How had I been so blind? But the truth was, I hadn't been blind. I had just refused to see it. I had been so desperate to believe in the marriage, to believe in her, that I'd ignored all the red flags waving right in front of my face. I had wanted to fix things, to make it work, because that's what you do when you love someone, right? You fight for them. You hold on. But there was no point in holding on anymore. I picked up my phone, finally checking the messages. One was from Ryan. Ryan, I don't know what's going on, but if you need to talk, I'm here. I stared at the text for a moment, my finger hovering over the screen. Ryan had always been the one friend I could count on, the one person who would listen without judgment. But even though I knew he was there for me, I wasn't ready to talk about it. Not yet. I tossed the phone back onto the passenger seat and leaned my head back against the headrest, closing my eyes. The exhaustion hit me all at once, but so did the clarity. I knew what I had to do next. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was necessary. I needed to get a lawyer. The thought of divorce had been floating in my mind all night, but now it was concrete. There was no salvaging this marriage. Not after what Emma had done. Not after how she had treated me tonight. She had made it clear that she didn't care, that she wasn't willing to fight for us. And if she wasn't going to fight, then I wasn't going to waste any more of my time or energy on her. The pain of that realization hit me like a punch to the gut, but I swallowed it down. I had to be strong. I couldn't afford to fall apart now. As I drove back toward the city, the roads seemed emptier than before, but my mind was anything but. I started thinking about the logistics, where I would stay, how we would divide things, the conversations we would have to have. I didn't want to deal with any of it, but I knew it was coming. I would have to face her again, if only to tie up the loose ends of our life together. The thought of seeing her made my stomach turn, but I reminded myself that I was doing this for me now. I had given her enough of my time, my energy, my love. It was time to take care of myself. By the time I reached the outskirts of the city, I had made up my mind. I was going to stay at a hotel for the next few days, just until I could get my head on straight. I couldn't go back to that house, not yet. Not while the ghost of everything that had happened still lingered in every room. I pulled into the parking lot of a small, out-of-the-way hotel and checked in. The woman behind the counter gave me a sympathetic smile, probably noticing the look of defeat on my face. I didn't bother explaining. I just wanted a bed and a moment of peace. Once I was inside the room, I collapsed onto the bed, feeling the exhaustion catch up with me. My phone buzzed again, but I ignored it. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to think. I just wanted to sleep and forget about the nightmare my life had become, if only for a few hours. As I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, I felt a strange sense of closure settling in. It wasn't the kind of closure that comes with resolution, but rather the kind that comes with acceptance. This was my life now, a life without Emma, without the marriage I had built my future around. But maybe, just maybe, that wasn't such a bad thing. I woke up to the sound of rain tapping against the hotel window. For a moment, I had forgotten where I was, the fog of sleep making everything feel distant. But as my eyes adjusted to the dim morning light filtering through the curtains, reality crashed back in. The events of last night, the confrontation, the decision, they were all real. There was no escaping it now. I sat up slowly, the ache in my chest still lingering but less sharp than it had been. The rawness was fading, replaced by a strange sense of finality. This was my life now, different but still mine. And as much as it hurt, I knew I had done the right thing. I reached for my phone, half expecting to see more missed calls or texts from Emma. But there were none. She hadn't tried to reach out, hadn't made any effort to fix what was broken between us. It stung, but it also made things clearer. She was done. And so was I. I tossed the phone back on the bed and stood up, looking at my reflection in the mirror. I was still that same tired, broken man, but there was something new in my eyes, resolve. I wasn't going to let this destroy me. I wasn't going to let her betrayal define the rest of my life. After a quick shower and throwing on some clothes, I grabbed my wallet and keys. I had no plan for the day, no clear direction, but I knew I couldn't stay in that hotel room forever. I needed to face the world again, even if I wasn't sure where to start. As I drove aimlessly through the city, I found myself heading toward a part of town I hadn't visited in years. It was the neighborhood where Emma and I had first lived when we were newlyweds, back when everything felt full of promise and excitement. The memories of that time were bittersweet now, but something pulled me there, as if I needed to see where it had all begun in order to understand where it had ended. I parked the car and stepped out, walking down the familiar streets, the rain still falling lightly. The apartment building where we had lived looked exactly the same, though the years had weathered it slightly. I stood there for a moment, letting the memories wash over me, before turning away. As I walked, I passed by a small cafe that Emma and I used to go to every Saturday morning. It had been our place, a spot we'd laughed, talked about the future, made plans that now seemed like distant, irrelevant dreams. But what caught my eye wasn't the cafe itself. It was the woman sitting at the corner table inside. She was sipping coffee, staring out the window, seemingly lost in thought. She looked familiar, but it wasn't until I stepped closer that I recognized her. It was Stacy, Emma's old friend. I hadn't seen her in years, not since she and Emma had drifted apart for reasons I never fully understood. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should go in or just keep walking. But something inside me, maybe the need for closure, or maybe just the desire for a familiar face, made me push open the door. The bell above the cafe door jingled as I stepped inside, and Stacy's eyes flicked up to meet mine. There was a brief moment of surprise on her face, but then it softened into a warm, understanding smile. She waved me over, and I walked to her table, feeling oddly relieved to see someone who wasn't tied up in the mess my life had become. "Greg," she said, her voice gentle. "It's been a while." "Yeah," I replied, sitting down across from her. "A long while." She studied me for a moment, her eyes searching my face like she already knew something was wrong. "You look different. Is everything okay?" I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "No, not really." She nodded, not pushing for details, but there was a kindness in her eyes that made me want to open up. Maybe it was because she had known Emma, had known us before everything went to hell. Or maybe it was because, in that moment, I just needed to talk to someone who wasn't involved in the chaos. Emma and I, we're done, I said quietly, the words feeling heavy but also liberating. She's been lying, cheating. It's over. Stacy didn't look surprised. In fact, her expression was one of quiet understanding, like she had seen this coming long before I had. I'm sorry, she said softly. I always wondered if things were okay between you two. I hadn't heard from her in a while. I shook my head, feeling the frustration build again. She didn't care. That's the worst part. I don't know how long she's been checked out, but last night, it just became clear. She's done. And so am I. Stacy reached across the table and placed her hand on mine. Greg, you deserve better than that. I always thought you did. Her words hit me harder than I expected. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized something I hadn't before. Stacy had always been there, on the edges of our lives, but always kind, always supportive. And now, in this moment of complete destruction, she was here again, offering me something I hadn't felt in a long time, genuine care. I don't even know where to go from here, I admitted, my voice cracking slightly. I built my whole life around her, and now, you start over, Stacy said gently. You rebuild. Without her. Her words were simple, but they held a truth I hadn't been ready to accept until now. I could rebuild. I could start over. And maybe, just maybe, there was life beyond this betrayal. We sat there in silence for a few moments, the rain tapping against the window, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to hope. The pain was still there, the wounds still fresh, but I could see a path forward now, even if it was just a glimmer in the distance. Do you want to get out of here? Stacy asked, breaking the silence. Maybe take a walk? Clear your head. I looked at her, feeling a strange sense of possibility. Yeah, I said, standing up. I'd like that. As we stepped out into the rain, I realized something important. This wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of something new, something I hadn't even considered before. A new life, a new beginning, and maybe, just maybe, that wasn't such a bad thing after all.